Welcome to Career and Life Chats with Andrea, where I chat with lawyers about their careers and what makes a meaningful life. My guest today is Bill Manning, a veteran and esteemed trial lawyer. He started his career clerking for the Honorable Suzanne Sedgwick, the first female district court judge in Hennepin County, Minnesota. He then worked as an assistant state attorney general and manager of their tort division, followed by private practice at Robbins Kaplan for 35 years. There, he was equity partner and one of the top revenue producers. Bill represented injured individuals and businesses in all aspects of litigation. And in the last 15 years, he focused 80% of his time on patent cases for plaintiffs and defendants. He retired in 2020. As noted in the Minneapolis Star Tribune, Bill was named one of the dozen best IP attorneys in the country. He was twice recognized for exceptional service by Fortune 500 General Counsel. It is noteworthy the number of multi-million-dollar settlements and verdicts he's achieved, in addition to recovering $1 billion for his plaintiff patent clients. Even more noteworthy are his integrity, conviction, and kindness, as well as a rich inner life that he has sustained over the years. In his current chapter, Bill is collaborating with various leaders on reparations efforts and continuing his spiritual studies of issues reflected in the writing of Maya Angelou, Mary Oliver, and David White. He counts President Nelson Mandela as one of his mentors, and he has delivered many inspirational keynotes on President Mandela throughout the United States. I am honored to count Bill as one of my mentors, and I feel so fortunate to continue learning from him. Thank you so much for joining me today, Bill. I'm so excited for our conversation.
Thank you for having me. You're very kind. It's very nice to see you. I enjoy all of your recordings, podcasts, all of your guests. I particularly loved seeing Matt McFarland and Tony Beasley. I had the pleasure of working only briefly with Matt, but it was great to see him. And with Tony, I got to work a lot with Tony, and he's a magnificent lawyer in person. I love watching him, his fatherhood on Instagram. So anyway, it was great to see both of those interviews, but I've enjoyed all the guests. I've watched almost every one of your podcasts. So
that's so kind. Thank you for taking the time, Bill.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, and I've been so looking forward to this conversation with you. We have had many, many fascinating conversations about the inner life over the years, especially in the last several. And you have one of the most fascinating journeys that I have known with any lawyer in my career so far. And I'm so curious, when you look back on your career so far, what are some of the themes and patterns that come to mind for you?
Themes or patterns? Well, I would say themes and patterns, when you look back, when I look back on a career, is what you mentioned is the tremendous importance of developing an inner life, which is something that really develops over time. One has to begin it consciously, work at it consciously, but it changes and grows. And in the practice of law is very difficult. I describe it, if I had to pick one word, I would describe it as relentless. I mean, it's just there's always more work to do. You're never sort of enough. And to meet that challenge, there's so many things we need to develop professionally in ourselves, but to really meet that challenge, I think the most important thing, is to have an inner life. So that's two big words.
Yeah, two very big words. And let's unpack that a little bit. When you say inner life, what do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by it and what it is for others can be dramatically different things. So there's no prescriptive, sort of one way for anyone. But for me, I've developed an inner life out of something with a lot of indications, out of something called anthroposophy, and I have used those indications, but it's not in any way, as I say, prescriptive or a belief system. It's something that you make your own. You're your own guru, your own priest, your own doctor, you're your own teacher. And, surely I go to doctors and have teachers, but you understand what I'm saying. So it's a new world in that way, I think, for all of us, that we need to own ourselves and own the beginning of an inner life. And so wherever one finds the indications from, that's where I have found indications that are very meaningful to me and are helpful. But it's still nonetheless then something that I have done with lots of help. Don't get me wrong, not alone, in a lot of different ways, but it's still something that one needs to undertake and say, I'm going to do this, just like many other tasks, so to speak, only it becomes a very different task.
Right. What were some of the indications for you that the inner path was unfolding for you?
Well, I mean, one of the things, there's so many different approaches, as I say, and for a while I looked at Eastern approaches, which I have great respect for. So I have respect for every approach to an inner life, but this approach to an inner life was one, more Western, and two, I would say it involves very disciplined thinking about thinking. So taking a great thought, whether that be a poem or a prayer or something, just take a great thought. I mean, a simple one is wisdom lives in the light, 3 words, 4 words, wisdom lives in the light, 5 words, okay. And you take something very, very, very simple like that, or take something more complex, like the poem Invictus of Nelson Mandela, which we talk about, and you think about it in a disciplined way. And in that process of thinking about thinking, something is revealed. And it's not the great thought itself per se, it can be. And it's not the discipline, but it's the process of thinking about thinking that reveals something in one's being that you can become aware of and more aware of and potentially live out of it. And yes, so I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so curious too. I mean, wisdom is the light. Say more about that. I mean, that's a great 5-word phrase right there.
Well, every day we get up, right? Wisdom lives in the light. Well, what is light? So I mean, we can talk about light and sunlight, and we can talk about it from a quote scientific standpoint in the sun and what current science says, or we could take an idea that light is the sacrifice of very higher spiritual beings. Oh, now, that's for many people, that's like a weird idea, right? Well, but what if in fact light is something that is given to humanity and given to the earth and given through the cosmos in a very spiritual way? And what if we could discover that? And what if we could discover that in ourselves? And irrespective of, quote, the scientific paradigm, there's many other truths, many other ways to look at things. So just a simple phrase like that, wisdom lives in the light, it's not just in the phrase, but it's in many ideas and readings and whatnot about that idea that it's light is the sacrifice of spiritual beings. Now, if you've never heard that before, that sounds weird out of the blue in a little podcast like this. But if I had time to develop that idea and give you the foundation for it, then it wouldn't seem so weird.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's a course right there, Bill.
It is. That would be an hour-long conversation. And it's the kind of conversations we don't have anymore. This is what Twitter and Facebook, I mean, we have so de-elevated conversation.
Right.
The art of conversation.
Right. So much is compressed to these tweetable sound bites that it
Right.
really strips the fullness of the richness that is actually in everything.
Yeah. I mean, it really takes time to develop ideas with someone, exchange ideas, think, listen to each other, internalize what another person has said. I mean, this whole art of conversation, I don't really like to have a Zoom call that's less than an hour because, and a lot of people, want to schedule a 30-second or 30-minute, or 45-minute at most. And I prefer an hour and a half if it's a personal friend.
Yeah.
because something happens, where you can delve into a conversation.
Right. There's something magical that I think happens between the space of two people. And once you settle into the emotional groove and that connection with the other person, I mean, you're right. That is not something that can just be one and done in a 30-minute call.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you mentioned this David White. I love one of the things he says. He says, one of the most boring things is when people want to tell you what they believe in. He says, I don't care what people believe in. I care what they love. Who do they love? Are they generous? Are they kind? And I think one other question that would be interesting in a conversation, besides those questions, to back and forth with people is, what is your inner life? Everyone has an inner life. People may not be on an inner path, but everyone is it has some aspect of an inner life, even if they're not, even if they're completely atheist, for example, and say there's no, afterlife or anything of the sort. There's still an inner life and potential for conversation about that.
Right. Well, so Bill, I'm curious, when you say that, I'm curious what is the relationship between your inner life with the course of your multiple decades practicing as an attorney? How is that translated concretely in your legal practice?
Well, very concretely, in that I would say it's the main thing that helped me get through what I'll call the rigorous demands of the practice of law. They're very rigorous, travel and all of what's involved. But what it has really helped me with is that practicing law is completely about someone else. It's not at all about yourself. And that's a very hard thing. Every day, when you think about walking into your office and you're in your office for 8 or 10 hours a day and you bill 8 hours a day, how much time have you really spent thinking about the client? And how much time have you spent thinking about yourself? And you're billing for that. And in fact, what our obligation is to think about someone else. And it's a very hard thing to do. And not all professions or all careers demand it in the same way that the practice of law does. So what I say is that in the practice, that what we do is that we stand as selflessly as possible in the shoes of someone else and give them voice. Now that's easy to meditate before a court appearance and to meditate about your client for months before a trial so you can stand up and articulate their pain or the loss of a loved one or whatever type of injury that someone has suffered, that you live with that and try to live into that and articulate it. But it's the preparation. And that's every hour of every day, which far exceeds the amount of time, for example, we spend in court or other things. And so that I would say is what has been the importance of an inner life for me, to understand. And obviously I fail at it many, many times. So the failure is more than the quote success. You can't beat yourself up, but it's a goal.
Yeah. So say more about that. I mean, there's so much lead work that goes up, in advance of a court hearing or a court trial or even a court, or a settlement outside of court. Do you have any practices that, you would use when you were practicing to remind yourself of that inner path, and the reminder that this was all in service of your client and not about you? What would you do in those instances?
I would do a lot of little things. I mean, a couple of them come to mind is every day before I cross the threshold to my office, I would just try to pause for 2 seconds and just say, it's not about me, which would bring up all of these concepts that I've been talking about and bring that up for me. The other is to close the door and actually meditate for 5 minutes. You can do a lot of meditation in 5 minutes, but the other is every time you're on an elevator, to say either a meditation, a prayer, or to just say, this is not about me. What am I doing? Am I successfully standing in the shoes of someone else today? Have I been? Will I this afternoon in what I am doing? And so it's using reminders in very small little ways that are meaningful, and that can be different for everyone.
Yeah, and it seems like those reminders, I mean, they actually don't take that much, but there is also just it's a switching of our habit, right? Like if we're not used to doing that, if we're not used to pausing and thinking it's not about me today, it's about somebody else. It feels like that's almost the hardest step. And then once you get over that hurdle, I mean, all of the steps and tips that you're recommending, they're all very doable. It's just
I, I,
in that
I
muscle.
remember to this day and I spoke about it in a letter I wrote, a retirement letter of the first female Supreme Court justice in Minnesota, Rosalie Wall, and she talked about, you all be, it was our swearing in, so there's 1,000 whatever, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of young people there, and being sworn in, and she says, you're all going to be successful in one form or another, and I'm not worried about that. You're all smart. You've all passed the bar. What my concern is, will you practice law with a heart? And she went and developed that. It was a very beautiful, beautiful talk. Something I remember very well to this day. It had a big impact on me when she was speaking about it. And I think one of the things that we don't do is talk enough about the profession of the law as a vocation as a calling. So when I talk with lawyers, if you ask lawyers, go back in time to that moment when you dreamed about becoming a lawyer. Why did you want to become a lawyer? And most people, 80% of lawyers will say something about justice, about wanting to help people, but about seeking justice, about righting wrongs. They'll talk about Brown versus the board, or they'll talk about some other case or something that has inspired them, right? And we tend to lose that
Yeah.
because the practice of law is relentless.
Right. And say more about, and with respect to that relentlessness, why do we lose that? And how do we become so self-absorbed?
Well, I think it's difficult in every business, right? And in every corporation, there's a culture, or in every nonprofit can become small. Law firms, we all know the billable hour and the relentless nature of that, and the economic pressures of the practice of law, none of which we were really thinking about when we decided to become a lawyer, right? We wanted to seek justice. We wanted to do good. And I think it's more than possible to continue to do that in law firms, in corporations, in nonprofits, but it now requires us to figure out ways to own that. My suggestion is to have an inner life in some form or fashion. Not my way, not your way, but whatever, that's like a whole separate seminar. What is an inner life, right? And that would be a really good seminar for law firms and lawyers to be talking about more, in my humble view.
No, I completely agree. Well, Bill, I want to shift gears a little bit. I know that President Nelson Mandela is a big force and impact and in your life, and I'm curious how that all began. How did he come into your consciousness?
Well, the world was aware of Nelson Mandela, when he was in prison, aware very much. I remember the very day in 1990 when he was let out of prison and walked out of prison. In 1994, he became the president of South Africa. And it was in 1994 that he published his book, The Long Walk to Freedom. What happened between 1990 and 94 is fascinating. We don't have enough time to do that. I do a lot of that and many other things. But there was the disinvestment movement that was predominantly in university campuses. This country did not do well at all in being anti-apartheid as a country. We kind of adopted Nelson Mandela, different politicians, by 94 and in 1990. But early on, our government was actually a part of his arrest in 1963, the CIA giving tips. So, but I was aware, as many people were, in the disinvestment movement. And then this book, Long Walk to Freedom, it changed my life because you can read Long Walk to Freedom on many levels. You can read it on the history of South Africa. You can read it on the details of his biography. You can also read it and visibly see his inner life because he is describing it. And at that time in 1994, I started practicing in 1978, I would say I was still developing, as I still am, but I was developing an inner life. And it hit me like a ton of bricks that what I was doing, attempting to do, was almost precisely what he did. And I read it and reread it and read the book a number of times because it gave me such inspiration to continue in what I was doing. So then, my daughter went to South Africa and worked in an AIDS clinic for a summer in a shanty town. We went to South Africa and I traced his steps of his life, both Robben Island, but also where he lived in Soweto and where he was born and on and on. I won't go through that, but that was magnificent, where he practiced law in downtown Johannesburg, visited his former office. And so, I've lived into him, and he has been a great mentor to me. Then I had the opportunity to meet him, and that was transformative.
Yeah, say more about the actual meeting.
Well, he came to the Twin Cities. He came to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and spoke to the NAACP. Sold out, broke every fire code. People were hanging from the rafters, as they should have been. It was fantastic. This magnificent daishiki on. Paul Wellstone introduced him, which was incredible, as only Paul could do. And the next day, I was at a gathering of 200 people in which he spoke. And that's where I met him. But when he spoke, it was stunning because he stood in front of 200 people. And this was a lot of the people who gave them money for him to come, and some corporate chieftains and CEOs and on and on. And he stood in front of people and for 45 minutes said, "You have too much. You need to share." And people kind of were waiting for him to leave that topic. Like, would you maybe stop? We're getting uncomfortable after 5 minutes. We're getting uncomfortable after 10 minutes. No, he didn't. He kept going for 45 minutes. It was stunning. And he was speaking out of his inner life, which is what he did to start the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and the way he led. Everything he was doing when he led, but also in prison, he was leading out of his inner life that he had birthed there. Okay. Now he hadn't birthed that when he was age 46 and was rebelling against apartheid. He had birthed it in a different way. That's what I mean. Everyone has an inner life, but it was different. But in prison, he birthed it in a very conscious way and lived out of it. And to have studied him, by that time I'd given about 500 books away of Nelson Mandela. And one of the mayors in town, I had actually given The Long Walk to Freedom to. And he hadn't read the book, but he was there at that event. And when I saw him, I said, "You read that book?" "No." Anyway, he was then able to get me an introduction to Nelson Mandela. It was great.
Yeah, as I listen to you talk, Bill, it strikes me that, with any circumstance that presents to us in life, we can respond to it at so many different levels. We can, as you talked about with his book, you can read it on the historical level, but you can also read it on the level of the inner life. Likewise, at the beginning of this conversation, with even just the 5-word phrase, "Wisdom is in the light," you can approach it from a scientific lens, right? But you can also approach it from this inner path viewpoint and approach. And so it strikes me that truly everything that we do in our life, everything that shows up, every person who crosses our path, we have that choice to say, well, what approach do I want to take in response to whatever is showing up right now? Do I want to take it on the worldly, literal level, or do we want to inquire as to, is there something deeper? Is there something underneath the surface here that I might not initially be sensing?
Mhm. Well spoken, well said, well said, well said.
Yeah, it also strikes me too, there are often, I feel like many people discover this inner path as a result of difficult circumstances. And those circumstances will look different for every single person. But it's usually not when we're coasting in life that we pause to contemplate. It's usually because things are just really not going the way that we would like it to. And we can either continue resisting that, or we can alternatively consider, perhaps life is trying to send me a message. Perhaps life is trying to talk to me, and it is absolutely my choice whether I choose to receive that or not.
Yeah, all these experiences. I mean, one of the things there's a lot of people who watch this who admire you, and I admire you, and consider you a friend. And I just want to say that what you just said, you described so beautifully. I hope you don't mind me saying this on your homepage. This I think is about a 12-minute uninterrupted talk that you give about homecoming, which describes a kind of threshold experience that you had coming out of the law and changing your life and going to something new. And we all have these threshold experiences. Sometimes people don't admit them. I mean, sometimes they come in illness, sometimes they come in death, divorce. I mean, all kinds of things that they come. I mean, Nelson Mandela, a threshold experience was going to prison. Now, a lot of people could go to prison and wither away. And it was horrible, the conditions. I mean, so don't think that I'm saying it was 1 ounce justified. I mean, apartheid was a horrible, horrible, horrible thing. Persecution, torture, and it continued from 1990 to 1994, which when he was out and not president, but not on him, but on his people. And yet he went there and it was a threshold experience. And he used it and consciously developed something that I would suggest that the Western world can't really comprehend. And I put South Africa as Western, but it can't comprehend because a majority oppressed people, 10 to 1, 50 million people, 45 million of color, 35 Black, 10 million, about half are East Indian and half Asian, 45 million people who were oppressed forgave a minority oppressor. This is an act of Christianity, of love and forgiveness that the Western, quote, Christian world can't really comprehend because we don't lead with love and forgiveness, with due respect to our wonderful country. And I mean that, I admire our country, but it doesn't take long to see places that we're not leading with love and forgiveness. And it's very hard for people to kind of, in my mind, accept the magnificence of what occurred there.
Yeah.
And what's amazing when you travel to South Africa and you go into a shanty town that's very poor, forgiveness is alive and well on the street corner, and talking to people. So he has pervaded the consciousness of South Africa. Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, when you think about the concept of forgiveness, I mean, do you see any possibility of that happening here in the United States?
Well, I hope to. So what I'm doing right now with my retirement, I'm 70 years old, but I'm working very hard. Many a Zoom call, many attending seminars and whatnot, but I'm working with a group of people to try to establish what I'll call wealth transformation funds, in what people talk about as reparations, but rather than talking about reparations, we're really talking about wealth transformation funds, where the money that would be given would predominantly be given for housing and trust funds for children and educational funds and various other things that are wealth building. It would also be savings account and cash. But in any event, that work is proceeding. I actually just got off a call yesterday that was very inspirational. So it's been a lot of hard work, and there's a lot of hard work left, and there's a lot of people working on it and talking about it. I'm just one little aspect of it. And anything I'm doing, I'm leading from behind. You know, in my career, most of the time I was leading from the front with great people. I mean, at Robbins, I worked with magnificent people, you being one of them. Magnificent people, talented people, but still my role was a little bit more out front, at least on occasion. And here, I'm leading from behind. There's other people out front.
Yeah. How's that transition going, leading from behind?
It's a challenge. You know, it's a lot of listening. Before every call, you know, we're reminding myself that I'm not right. And an opinion is okay. And listening is okay. And, you know, I mean, we did a lot of that at work too, but ultimately I would have maybe a little bit of an outsized influence, right? I could, no longer. So it's good. It's a good challenge.
It's a new phase for you, Bill.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we get there and we can repair, so a part of this whole process will be a truth-telling process, and that is going on. There's so many great Black authors. I mean, Eddie Glaude and Begin Again, and Isabel Wilkerson in Caste, and her other book, Rise of Many Suns, and that may have misstated the title, and numerous other people. Okay, Eric Dyson, and so many magnificent Black writers talking today. The truth. It's up to us to listen and read, and a lot of wonderful Asian writers writing, okay, and telling the truth. And it's up to us to listen. But if we do, and particularly on what I'm speaking about is reparations for Black Americans from slavery, because of the incredible broken promise of 40 acres and a mule in 400 years. And it's that if we come with a repair package, we have to apologize. Then the question is whether the apology is accepted. If it is, we can reconcile. Doesn't mean we can't be friends now. It doesn't mean we're not interacting. It doesn't mean we're not trying to work together and do things. But we as a country have never sincerely repaired what happened for 400 years. Not just 250 years, but then, you know, the 100 years of Jim Crow, which have persisted right into the police violence that we see today that everyone knows about. So that's what I want to be involved in, is attempting to repair and apologize.
Right. And with respect to apology, what makes for an effective apology, and why are apologies so hard?
Isn't that something? Isn't that something? Yeah, isn't that something? I mean, in South Africa, for example, in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, if you came forward and confessed your crime and were sincerely sorry, you were forgiven. There'd be no prosecution. People who came in front of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, 90% of the people were the people who were oppressed, who wanted to tell their story, who were Black South Africans. Only 10% of people came forward. So few people came forward and confessed and apologized. And if they did, they were forgiven, if it was sincere. So apologies are very, very difficult things. It requires enormous humility. Maybe to say, I was wrong. And we're all wrong. And we all have things that come out in whether they're our relationships at home or work. I mean, in a law firm, for example, you're bumping into each other all the time. There's all kinds of ways you're bumping into each other, right? And you're trying to work on a case together, and there's respectful disagreements, and then maybe there's not. So any event, you can find yourself needing to apologize. I did, needing to with some frequency, frankly, because you're struggling for the same goal, but you bump into each other hard sometimes. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. And it strikes me that apology requires, in your words, stepping into the shoes of another person, whether it's a client or somebody else, regardless of whatever the relationship is with that person. There's also that element of regret, sincere regret that I messed up. My bad. I can and I should have done better, but I didn't. And then also, I think the sincere desire to not do that again and to be better. And we can be better. I mean, I think that's what's so remarkable about the human potential is that we really truly can choose how we want to be at any given moment, but also going forward in life. And I think the final component that makes apologies so difficult is just pride. I have so much pride, and I think about the apologies I have made recently as well as in the past. I mean, they were rough. It was a big hurdle, even just to get over the I messed up. That was not cool of me to do at all. And it was inconsiderate of how you might be thinking or feeling in that situation. And I apologize, and whether somebody chooses to accept the apology, that is out of our control. But it seems like there is something so clean about regret and apology that allows us to move forward and continue improving and growing and being kinder to the world around us.
And it may takes time sometimes for people to accept the apology. So one, they had to hear it, digest it. Was it sincere? They have to think about it. I like to think about something conceptually that I think about the afterlife, and that when we pass, that one of the things we do is that we experience the pain that we have inflicted on other people the way they did. That we experience that. We actually have an experience of that. So if that's accurate, and it's an idea that I live with, then apologizing now is actually a very healing thing, for not just selfishly for me in the spiritual world, but for this person, right? I mean, I've apologized to clients. I've surely apologized to colleagues, both partners and associates. I mean, one time I completely blew it in a mediation. I was so angry at the other side, and particularly the other side's client, who was saying some things that infuriated me. I represented two young men who had burned over 80% of their body. And I said something that was just completely inappropriate. I mean, it was terrible. And, within 10 minutes, I was back to the mediator and sort of begging to apologize. I mean, I had done something that was just unprofessional and potentially could hurt my client, right? And, I can justify it and say, oh, well, I was a passionate advocate. No, I made a mistake. And the person was there in good faith, and I offended him. So I always I just reflect on some of these events, and they're humbling.
Yeah, and I think the sincerity with which we do it, it matters. I think we lead with our energy before anything else, before the words that are actually coming out of our mouth. And so if the apology is sincere, I think in most instances people do sense that. And I know certainly when I have received apologies, I think so much more of them afterwards.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Right.
Yeah. Well, Bill, I know you're a lover of poetry. I was hoping you would share one of your favorite poems with us today.
Well, there's so many, but I will pick one and share it, and it's short, and it's actually a little verse meditation prayer by Rudolf Steiner that goes like this. More brilliant than the sun, purer than the snow, finer than the ether, is the self, the spirit in my heart. This self am I. I am this self. And because it's short, I'm going to say a few words about it, okay? More brilliant than the sun. Think about this. It's not metaphorical. That our being, that our I am, our spiritual being, our divinity, our eternity, our infinity that's in us, that we can come to know, the star within us, is more brilliant than the sun, that we have that star. It's purer than that fresh fallen snow, which is so gorgeous. It's finer than the great blue sky, the ether. The spirit, it's the spirit in my heart. This self am I. I am this self. These two words, I am, they're the only words I can say for me. In my holy of holies, you can't say them for me. You can say them for you. I can't say them for you. This I am, it unlocks something, right? So in this meditation, I've worked with this meditation for over 40 years. It's a spiritual idea. It has energy, it has life. The same way that Nelson Mandela got energy and life from Invictus, this poem. It has energy. It gave him great spiritual energy, amongst many other things that he used, psalms and vocal verses and many other things. And I use many other things. But this one thought is a spiritual reality, and I can then think about it. And it's life-giving still, and continues to give life. This is remarkable, this process of thinking about thinking that reveals something. So yeah, more brilliant than the sun.
That you truly are, Bill.
No. Everyone is, all 7 of us. This is the way in which we are truly equal.
Yeah.
We're dramatically different, right? You and I look different. We have different ages, different cultures, everything. And most of us embrace and love diversity. And we love to look. It's a great thing about New York City. You go into a subway car and the whole world is in that one car. It's fantastic, right? But we're not the same, and we're not living equally because we don't recognize the divinity in each other. Mm. This is what Nelson Mandela did. This is why he loved and why he forgave. He hated the oppression. I mean, it wasn't simple, but he rose, above, right? And we can all rise above and see how we are absolutely equal. No matter if anyone's ever heard of our approach, to an inner life or whatever. So anyway, yeah.
So beautifully said. I just adore you, Bill, and I
adore you. I adore you. I want to tell one little story about you that I've told numerous times. You've heard it a few times, but I always tell it to other people about you. We're in St. Louis giving that a talk, and Tony was there, Tony Beasley, and 4 or 5 other people, and we all had a role in a days long talk. And I had talked, and another very tall white gentleman, Aaron, had talked 6, 7, and I don't know, you were 4th or 5th. And instead of going to the front of the room, you walked up to in the middle aisle, and you gave your talk to both sides of the room from the middle of the aisle. And it was stunning, right? It was a stunning, and people were like, oh, wow, she's with us and she's talking to us, and you generated this conversation. I was blown away. It was like, wow, this was so great. So this great ability you have to take risks and find the new in yourself has been in you for a long, long, long time. And I admire the path you've been on, what you've done.
Thank you. And thank you for seeing the light in me before I saw it in myself.
Well, you're more than welcome, but a lot of other people saw that light too, and have seen it for a long time. And it's great that it's shining so brightly.
Oh, it's shining.
It is.
Well, Bill, I have loved this conversation with you today. Are there ways that people can get a hold of you? Are you open to connecting with people even in your retirement?
Delighted to connect with anybody. I have plenty of time, far more time than I'm sure other people do. So, William Henry Manning, no number on gmail.com, William Henry Manning, gmail.com. I'm on LinkedIn. My phone number is out there, 612-750-4773, 612-750-4773. Call anytime, email anytime. I'm delighted to schedule, talk about anything. If I can ever help, I'm happy to. I have had the fortunate opportunity. I'm passionate about talking about Nelson Mandela, and I've been invited to a number of federal bar associations around the country, about 25 or so. And so I just say that I'm delighted to come and speak with anybody if they want in more detail about Nelson Mandela. That has been a great joy for me and still is. So.
Well, I have a feeling your phone's going to be blowing up, so careful what you wish for.
It's a real pleasure to be with you. It's a real joy.
And likewise, it always is. And I'm so looking forward to continuing our conversations, Bill. Thank you for today.
I look forward to continuing and to listening more in the next conversation to you. It's an honor to be with you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Pleasure.
Well, if we're going to call a wrap on today's conversation, if you've enjoyed this chat with Bill, be sure to hit like and subscribe for future videos. I would also love to hear what you learned today. You can leave a comment below, or you can write me through my website, AndreaYangCoaching.com. We'll see you next time.